So let's just kick off. So welcome to the first Edinburgh Splunk User Group for the year. So you've got myself, Andrew, and Tom, who both co-lead the user group. I'm going to ask Tom to click through some slides just for some general housekeeping before we get into the topics today. So I just want to mention that the Teams instance is, and the user group itself is sponsored by Adarma, but this is the last time that you're going to hear from us about this. In this, I'm really bad at presenting this. I've been up far too late. Let's start again. Yeah, we won't be discussing Adarma beyond this slide, but it's just to let you know that we've sponsored by them. Next slide. So unfortunately for me, this will be put on YouTube and will be publicly viewable there. If you want to discuss any topic in this session, do be aware that it will be put online. So if you mention any confidential information or anything that you don't want to be made public, please refrain from saying it while we're recording. And do refrain from identifying any specific clients that you may work with as well, just for general OPSEC reasons. So the agenda that we've got for you today is a discussion on Log4J, which I think everyone in the security field would have at least have heard of over the past month or so. So Tom's going to be talking about that. And then I'm going to essentially play a YouTube video that I uploaded at lunchtime about how to Splunk some video games, especially one that is based in Edinburgh itself. And then afterwards, we will have a raffle and just do any other business, and we'll encourage any discussion at that point. So some general house rules. So the user group is for technical discussions. It's led by technology, so we do not allow any sales pitches or any advertisement like that. Any opinions that we share are our own, and they are not meant to be selling you a product. It's also an inclusive environment, so we follow the Berlin Code of Conduct. So if anything goes against that, please do let us know, either by emailing us or leaving us a comment somewhere. And yeah. So we have a raffle that we will enter anybody who's currently in the participants list. And yeah, so if you don't want to be added to the raffle, do let us know before the end of the second presentation, and we'll just remove your name from the list of people being raffled off to. So the raffle itself is for a personal subscription to any JetBrains product, because JetBrains is also a sponsor of the user group. And I think that's about it. I do want to mention before we go into Log4j that we're still having to do virtual user groups, even if the restrictions in Scotland were like literally announced today that we in theory could do it. But Splunk, the Splunk user group leadership themselves are not in a position to allow any non-virtual user groups, but this may change depending on the general situation. I believe if it is turned into an on-site User Group. I think there may be some form of wafer or something like that that you would need to sign. But once we get the actual information from the leadership team ourselves, we'll share that out to the group. So with that, I will pass it over to Tom, who will talk a lot about Log4j.
Set expectations there. Hi everyone. So yeah, hi, Tom Wise, Solutions Architect for Adarma. So I'm going to talk to you about Log4j today, the most talked about log in 2021. Obviously, we talk a lot about logs in the Splunk world, but this was definitely even in the short time frame, probably the most talked about one last year. Now, I'm just going to caveat and claim I'm no expert in this. It's just I realize that I generally present Phantom or Splunk SOAR stuff, and so I thought I'd deviate from that and maybe do something a bit more of a topical discussion here. So I'm going to kind of go through, the journey, I guess, like what is it, what's affected, what can happen, what Splunk parts are affected or were affected by it, and then obviously go into kind of how bad it could have been, and then just a little bit extra, just a little bit else just to tie it up as well. Okay, so obviously a lot of you, if you were in the right role, I guess, around sort of Christmas time, probably have been in many meetings and discussions about patching and all that kind of stuff. But if we take it right back to the start, like what is Log4j? Because obviously everyone's heard of it, but I guess we need to understand what it was before we then start understanding, I guess, how bad it actually was or is still, and any repercussions. So as you would expect, it basically logs or records events, errors, routine system operations, and then it communicates diagnostics about them to systems administrators and users. So again, as it says in the name, it is basically a logging mechanism. It is open source, provided by Apache. And a common example is, if you click on a web link, you get a 404 message. Then the server running that domain of the web link that tells you there's no such page, it will record that event. And again, it'll be available to the administrators via that Log4j mechanism. So a very kind of simplistic timeline, and there is obviously a few more kind of smaller elements to this timeline as well, but I just thought I'd capture kind of the main kind of as things were found, as things were patched, and obviously as further things were then discovered. So around kind of late November was when the first discovery was made. It allowed basically unauthenticated attackers to do remote code execution on vulnerable systems. The CVSS score was a 10 out of a possible 10, so it was seen to be, pretty bad from the outset. And at that time, all Log4 versions 2.0 up, all the way to 2.14.1, for example, were actually affected by this CVE. So obviously, it took a little while to kind of get, the patch from Apache. So they released the patch on around the 6th of December to remediate that original CVE. But then there was actually a further one discovered, as you wouldn't expect. But yeah, so the vulnerability then allowed that code execution by an attacker, although it may have been via a different mechanism. Obviously, the patch still kind of brought in an open vulnerability that was still deemed to be, pretty bad, and affected again all the same versions previously, including the new CVE. The bug was actually with the patch itself. Then 13th of December, they released 2.16 to remediate that CVE 45046. Again, which allowed that remote execution. But then there was a further one found. You can see a pattern here. There was a further one found that then actually allowed a denial of service vulnerability, because it would allow infinite recursion, which would just really tie things up and cause all sorts of nasty bottlenecks. And again, that was everything from 2.0 all the way up to 2.16 were affected. There was a version that was excluded because it had a specific security patch, which was 2.12.3. But obviously, unless you were lucky to have landed right in that nice little sweet spot, then you were affected by this. It wasn't given as much of a kind of score. So the CVSS for that one was only 5.9. But obviously, as you can imagine, it still was a pretty big thing that needed patching. So as you would expect, the Log4j team then released 2.17. which fixed the DOS vulnerability. And then they released another patch, this time to remediate 44832, which was, again, it was further remote code execution, but it was specifically with like the JNDI LDAP source. And I'm just reading this off some notes that I have. Sorry. So the issue is fixed by basically limiting the JNDI data source names to the Java protocol in Log4j versions 2.17.1, 2.12.4, and 2.3.2. So it was kind of, I guess, a smaller patch in general, but again, still fixing or remediating, the vulnerabilities exposed by the existing patches. There hasn't been a huge amount, sort of, I guess, of fast-paced things happen since this. There is some further items still being discussed, and obviously, companies are still finding how, or trying to find out how deep this goes, and make sure they've patched everything where possible. Obviously, using all sorts of tools that are popping up nowadays as well, and searches, and obviously, vendor-provided things that I'll talk about in a minute too, when we talk about how Splunk are basically, or how Splunk have reacted to this vulnerability. I realize I changed my mouse pointer to a different screen. So who was affected? I mean, everyone, right? I mean, from a user perspective, it wasn't something that we had to fix, but certainly a lot of the services that we use nowadays were certainly affected by this vulnerability. And obviously, you can see here, I've just selected some of the kind of, the big hitters, I guess, that were known to be vulnerable. But effectively, it was, everywhere. And the link that I've got on the bottom there with the reference in GitHub from the NCSC basically is like a load of text files for each alphabetical letter, and inside of those text files is just lists of companies that have been affected by the Log4j vulnerability. So as you can see, no one was really safe except a few people, which I think I talk about in a slide in a second as well. So what about Splunk and Log4j? Obviously, there was a few items of Splunk or capabilities, if you like, in Splunk that were actually affected by this. Now, the list was actually a bit larger. A lot of them were kind of add-ons, especially ones that obviously did Java-y sort of stuff, right? But I just selected a few of the ones that I guess I was interested in, or at least the big hitters. So the data stream processor, which is something I've just completed the course for actually, and would highly recommend. It was a really good course actually. But this was affected. It's only on-prem because that's just the nature of the tool. But as you can see, pretty much all versions were actually affected. I think it's at 1.2.x at the moment. If I remember right, though, that there isn't, because 1 and 1.1 have now gone out of support, there isn't necessarily a patch to fix it. So you would have to upgrade to 1.2 in order to make sure that you were fully patched up for the Log4j vulnerability in your data stream processor installation. IT service intelligence, again, a big additional capability of Splunk for IT ops kind of side. Again, both cloud and on-premises were actually affected at this particular by this particular vulnerability. As you can see there was a couple of versions in the cloud, and then more on-prem versions that were affected in that as well. There is actually a Splunk document, or there's multiple depending on which one's affected, but there are Splunk documents to obviously talk about how to either disable or remediate this issue outside of any particular patch. And then also Splunk Enterprise, including heavy forwarders, excuse me. All non-Windows versions of 8.1 and 8.2, but only if DFS was used. So again, I don't know how many people have heard of DFS or use DFS at the moment. I think you have to be quite large organization with multiple Splunk instances for that federated search to really be a thing that you would use, and even that, and like I say, really it was only when you were using that it was actually that you were actually affected. And again, there was a document there that provides the steps required for removing Log4j from Splunk Enterprise. But again, as it sort of says, as it highlights, it's only if DFS is enabled or used on the platform that this was a problem. Again, there's a lot larger list of items. I just picked out what would fit on the slide, and I guess what was the more kind of impactful. But if you want to have a look at that link, there is a lot of sort of add-on-y bits in there to to look at if you want to see kind of what was affected, what versions were affected, and then of course see any documentation in order to resolve any of the potential vulnerabilities. So I just want to, there's kind of a 3 slides that step through kind of, again, setting the scene, sort of talking about what it leveraged, how it did what it did. Again, I'm not a Log4j or even the vulnerability itself expert. This was stuff that I kind of researched in preparation for my first in a while non-phantom talk anyway, at one of these user groups. So you've all used LDAP. We use it in every day, whether it be kind of in an Active Directory variant, or there is, LDAP is a protocol itself that's used to sort of access and maintain directory information. So user information, basically authentication mechanism, right? So if you want to register a business application, LDAP will store that. And then whenever you log in, obviously your application will send a request to that LDAP endpoint, and then it will verify your identity and let you in. Okay, so obviously this isn't the vulnerability. This is just setting the scene for how it then leveraged the vulnerability to do what it wanted to do. So JNDI, so the Java naming and directory interface, it basically provides that kind of the middleman or the API for applications using Log4j or Java to interact with LDAP, because it's not a, there's not a kind of direct connection there. You actually have to use an interface in the middle in order to allow it to speak to LDAP, sorry. And then JNDI is kind of that mechanism that's used, and then that's what was basically leveraged in this attack. So Log4j gone rogue. So effectively what would happen is you would have a HTTP injection of malicious JNDI lookup. So it would be a string, which is you can search obviously in your data to find as well, to see if it's actually being utilized. The JNDI string was then logged by Log4j. Log4j parses it, and because of the structure of the string, it then, instead of going to the proper LDAP server, it reaches out to the hostile LDAP server, again, authenticating, bringing down the vulnerable application load Java class, and then it executes the malicious code. And then obviously the LDAP server returns with the malicious Java class, and then that's pretty much, that's the vulnerability leverage. There is a slide later on that sort of talks about how we can stop it at each point. So obviously this is just kind of more to set out this is at a very high level of how they actually got or how they would actually get in should they want to leverage it. And obviously if you're not up to date with your patching either, which some people definitely weren't. So I just thought I'd bring a couple of known attacks, I guess, using it before we talk about sort of the remediation side of it. So APT35, they used it to deploy malware, and they're distributing a new modular PowerShell toolkit. Sorry, it's a state-backed one. Obviously, once kind of the word's out, these ones are probably already way ahead of the game, and they've already been developing tools and techniques to exploit it using any unpatched Log4j base code, which is why, there was a huge, really monumental effort, I guess, over kind of Christmas, last year to patch the hell out of everything, because, the Log4j was everywhere, and in some places that people probably weren't very aware of. So, yeah, these state-based and obviously any entity out there would be definitely looking for any vulnerable servers and certainly taking advantage of it. Microsoft observed that the group's increase in use of ransomware, and according to other checkpoint professionals or researchers, it came across as a bit amateurish and obviously rushed. I mean, I guess because they realized that, the patch would probably be out pretty quick. And so there was only a limited time in order to exploit this. But again, there's plenty of publicly available JNDI exploit kits, such as the world we live in. So it's not necessarily just state-backed as well. There could be script kiddies, etc. Using that again. And where I've kind of gleaned this information, I've put a reference on the slide. So obviously when they're available, if you need to, or if you want to have a look at where I've got this information from, then they're on the slides there. Just a couple of last ones as well for the whodunit. So Night Sky ransomware, so an unknown group of hackers is distributing Night Sky crypto lock-in malware. There's quite a large ransom demand, and then in exchange, obviously, they agree to provide a decryptor. And then Charming Kitty, I do love the names of some of these APTs sometimes. Again, it's a known kind of state-backed one, attempting to exploit Log4j against Israeli targets. Again, kind of knew that was going to happen. But yeah, just to show you that and these are like just 3 examples. But as I'm sure you can imagine, once the word was out, and probably they knew before most people, then there would already be lots of toolkits and kind of pre-baked attack packages ready to go, and people using them readily and freely, which again I suspect is why or I know why there was such a monumental effort in order to get everything patched up as soon as possible. And I guess a lot of the work was also an understanding in where is it in my environment, because even though some things utilize it, it didn't necessarily mean that you were using it, and therefore you weren't necessarily vulnerable. So how to stop it, or how to stop yourself being exploited by it, was pretty simple message really, is just update. Now obviously there was a little bit of a hiccup when it was 2.15, because there was actually a vulnerability that was introduced with the patch to fix the vulnerability. So there was a little bit of a whoops moment, I guess, but they have kind of released patches, as you can see by the timeline earlier, relatively quickly for this. And things have again been found pretty quickly as well if the patches haven't quite hit the mark. So we are currently the safest version anyway of Log4j for this particular vulnerability anyway, is 2.17.1. So one thing that I found quite funny was, and I say funny in a loose term, I guess, but is that the companies that weren't affected were basically the ones that just hadn't bothered to update to version 2. So you had this really weird paradox of like companies being really proud of the fact that they were not going to be affected by this vulnerability by blatantly telling everyone that they were in a really old end of life version of Log4j. So we're still on version 1, so we're not affected. Yeah, but it went end of life like 6 years ago, and they're not releasing patches for it anymore. So okay, just tell everyone that you're probably vulnerable, not to Log4j, this particular one, but tell why not? Let's have a look and see what we can get through version 1. So I did find it a little bit weird, and again, there wasn't a lot of places doing that, but there was definitely some articles out there where people were quite happy that they were on version 1 still. Again, it went end of life, so it's really, if you're on version 1, then okay, you may be avoiding this vulnerability, but it doesn't mean that you are more secure than people, for example, on 2.17.1 right now. So Splunk, obviously they've got the new Surge team created as well, and Ryan Kovar kind of has done quite a few blogs about this particular vulnerability, and also how to fix it, how to search for it, how to find it in your estate based on the data sources that you're going to have. And this document here, the advisory document, was actually regularly updated. I think the last time it was updated was the 7th of January. So obviously you could tell there hasn't been a lot of kind of fast-paced movement on the vulnerability since kind of that last patch was introduced and everything's sort of settled down. And now customers are really just more focused on patching everything because they've already found out where it is, and therefore they can really cut off the potential for any exploit. So again, just patch. So this was kind of like how to stop it, or where to act based on the different stages of the attack. So obviously, with the initial one, you'd be able to block certain user agent strings at the at the perimeter before they even come in. Again, the strings used for this vulnerability were pretty simple to find. So again, it didn't take a lot of SPL, for example, to find it. If you're already getting your WAF data, then of course you should be able to find user agent strings in there and look for known kind of JNDI structured information. Obviously, you could disable Log4j where possible. That wasn't always possible, because sometimes obviously it might have been a necessity, or you didn't have enough time to, I guess, replace the capability with something else. So that would have been one way to cut it off, but again, that wasn't always feasible. Obviously, patch Log4j, again, a pretty simple one. Then you can disable any lookups as well to your LDAP, or via to any LDAP queries that are sort of formulated You could stop the JNDI lookups, and that would be one way to stop this as well. And then obviously the disable remote code bases as well, because there was, the ability to download that malicious code can be stopped, and therefore you can stop yourself being vulnerable. Again, this was all taken from the Splunk bulletin or blog from Ryan Kovar, and again the link should be, I think, on this slide somewhere as well. So defending against it, obviously the documentation again is really good. Actually, I had quite a few good Splunk documents or blogs to read on how to both detect it and respond obviously to vulnerabilities. There's obviously kind of Splunk and SIEM stuff in there about how you would find where it is, obviously detect if it's actually being leveraged, and also there was some playbook stuff as well for the source side in order to remediate automatically should you have come across obviously the vulnerability in your detection space. Again, I would highly recommend reading some of these blogs if it is of interest to you, because again, I definitely haven't done the whole thing justice in comparison to a lot of the research that went on, through the Surge team and Ryan Kovar, etc., and Splunk in general. And obviously, there's a lot of other information out there online as well. It's not all just Splunk, but obviously in the context of the user group, etc., it's definitely worth talking about a really thorough reaction, in my opinion, from Splunk for a pretty big issue. So as you can tell, obviously I wasn't thickly involved in sort of fixing Log4j, etc., and I'm hoping that at least for people who maybe heard about it but weren't quite 100% sure what it was, how it was leveraged, and what you can do about it, hopefully that gave you a little bit of an insight anyway. So yeah, thanks for listening.
Just waiting for Teams to wake up for me.
No worries. Let me turn my.
So thanks, Tom, for going into that topic. And now we're just going to have a bit of whiplash and talk about video games instead, because that's the other thing that kept people up over Christmas. So you can sort of tell that I've been up a bit too long today, but it'll make sense in a second. So generally at the user group, we do go into topics like what Tom has covered, as well as phantom use cases, product releases, and generally things that people can't really Splunk by themselves, if that makes sense. So upon learning that there was a Splunk TA that we can use to ingest video game data, I decided I'll try it out, download it, see if I can have fun with it. And it turns out it's worth doing a user group presentation on. So I was going to post a longer video at some point last night, which was about 40 minutes long, but I've cut it down to half an hour. But even then, I'll probably skip about it, just for your sanity. But it's pretty much talk about Forza Horizon 4, which is a racing game that you can get on PC and Xbox. The main reason I bought it was because Edinburgh is actually heavily featured in the game, so you can drive whatever car that you have unlocked around the small part of the city that they've actually mapped out, and it sends traffic. It can send telemetry data using UDP. So, of course, since it's got data in a form that you can ingest, you can obviously Splunk it. So I'm going to share my screen, and I will talk about the app as soon as Teams wants to wake up. Sorry, it's just taking forever. So I would recommend putting the volume up, because it turns out when I recorded this, I left all the volumes a bit too low. And I'm just going to mute myself as well. So hopefully you should be able to hear it. If you can't in the first couple of seconds, please put your hand reaction up and I will try to fix that.
Yeah, Andrew, there's nothing coming out of that one, buddy.
I'm just unmuting myself and I'm just going to restart it. Apparently you can through Teams, but
there's a setting somewhere for include system audio when you share your screen.
Yeah, I clicked that, but
oh, you did that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I'm just going to play it as is, and I'll try to be as quiet as possible. In Splunk Base, there is an app that we can go and download called Racing Telemetry TA, and I will show you how to do that right now. So install. No, before we continue, was that all right?
There was something, yeah. I mean, yeah. I suspect I might have to turn my volume up a little bit actually, but yeah, no, there was definitely at least some talk in there.
So like, I'm at max volume on my PC and max volume on YouTube, so I'm barely hearing myself on it. So yeah, if you just turn the volume up a bit, so hopefully you should be able to hear.
Up to 11, right?
Yeah. Okay. And from now on, I will stop talking to the end of the video, unless people have any questions.
Installing the app couldn't be simpler. It's Racing Telemetry TK by Brett Adams. Brett Adams actually has done a similar app for Forza in the past, specifically for Forza, but with this new release, it has compatibility for a number of other racing simulators like Horizon 5, Project Cars 1 and 2, and F1 2019. Pretty much anything that uses UDP telemetry from a car output, which has similar payloads, should be accepted by this TA. So you just normally download it and install it into Splunk, which I did a while ago. Just open it up. The main one that you want to go into is dashboards, and you get 3 dashboards out the gate. Let's just open previous sessions just to show it off a little bit. And so let's just check the last time I played at this point. So as you can see straight away, you can see a lot of metrics that I have produced, and I'll show what this all sort of means shortly.
Now that we've installed the TA, we can now set up the racing telemetry input. So in the list of data inputs, you should see it under racing telemetry. So if you go into add new, you will see the settings for this input. But before you can fill this in, you need to work out how Forza sends its data to Splunk. So in settings under HUD and gameplay, right down at the bottom is this data out option. Now this is defaulted to off, but if you turn it on,
it starts the UDP telemetry data out service. These two options are unlocked as part of turning this to on, and this is the IP address that the UDP data is sent to and the port that it's being sent on. So since my Forza game is on the same instance as Splunk, I'm sending this to localhost, but if your Splunk instance was on a separate device, or if you're playing this game on Xbox, because the Xbox can do UDP out, you can set this to the IP address of your Splunk instance. So taking these values, you can put these in to the bind IP and the port value. I will show you the other options briefly. So index should be set to a metrics index, which I have created called telemetry, and it defaults to this racing telemetry source type. There are a couple of options that I haven't messed about with, but they are present. So metric, multi-measurement, and filter menu. And you can also change the rate limit to say how frequently your data should be updated. So in this case, it's 100 milliseconds. Now, if you look at the input that I actually have for this data, you notice that the port isn't the same as in the game. This is partially because when I was trying to set this up for the first time, I was noticing that my UDP traffic wasn't being ingested by Splunk itself. It took a bit of troubleshooting, but I worked out that the UDP traffic was actually being dropped by Windows, and I had to work out a way to route this into Splunk somehow. Thankfully, there are ways to do this with third-party tools, such as SimHub, which I have right here. And I'll maximize a bit more. SimHub is a third-party tool that is mostly used for peripherals and controllers, such as steering wheels and pedals, to give driver feedback based on the contents of the video game, which is what a lot of this telemetry data actually does. So to set this up, download the latest version of SimHub. There are other tools available, but I found this was the easiest one to use. So go to the Forza Horizon 4 option and click it to select it. You can see that it's waiting for data. I'll then click Game Config. So here you can pick the UDP port, which is the one that comes from Forza. And then you can select this option to forward UDP packets to a brand new port and an IP address. So this is the same port that I use for my telemetry data, and this somehow forwards the data to Splunk without Windows dropping the data. So now, since we've got UDP out, going into the input, we can drive about. If I open up the dashboards, so in the app itself, it's got a number of dashboards. So I'm just going to click Forza Real Time. And you can see, if I just move that, inputs are starting to be captured as so. And I'll demonstrate this a bit better in a second. And just to quickly show off the telemetry index, it's just a basic metrics index called telemetry. This is based on the number of dashboards that there are. So here it's got this macro called telemetry index, and under macros it looks at index equals telemetry, source type equals racing dash telemetry. So that's what this is based off of. So as you can probably tell from the dashboard, the performance of something like a Koenigsegg Agera RS might perform a bit differently. Like this car is very slippery, very quick on its toes, compared to something like the Honda Civic Type R. You can tell that every car in this game seems to have a different characteristic, and for example this one doesn't have that higher max speed, revs quite a bit, and its handling's not particularly that great at high speeds. It's quite sluggish, and you can probably tell that by the difference between the two cars in the Splunk dashboard that we've seen already. So compared to something like this Zonda car, which has a very high acceleration, but really poor handling on anything larger than like a tap, for example, and very poor braking, like it has no handbrake at all. There is a car for everyone, pretty much. Even if it's not the best on the road. And here we are, the main purpose why I picked this game specifically, to demonstrate Splunk's capabilities. We're in Edinburgh, although I don't really want to be driving around the city in a Robin Reliant, so let's just change this into something more powerful, let's just say. So here we are, just driving into Edinburgh. Now you can sort of tell already that this is quite a cut down version of the city. We're actually it's very hard to sort of judge where you are until you actually get onto here on Princess Street, with the castle rendered in the background, the gardens, various statues to our side, the art museum, Sir Walter Scott monument. You got Waverley. And you've got trams, so you have to be careful when you play this game. But you've got a lot of Princess Street sort of in the background. And you can see the bridges from here as well, which isn't realistic at all, but Edinburgh is about a tenth of its actual size, so they have to cut corners somewhere. So let's have a bit of a drive around. So we're driving through Cowgate at the moment, which is a bit like less clubby than in real life. Straight into Grassmarket. Which is very nicely recreated. Although, if you know Edinburgh, you would sort of expect Victoria Street to be where I'm driving right now, and Cowgate a bit more turned to the right, sort of, rather than going up Candlemaker Street. And the Tron's not the Tron Theatre and University and all that isn't present, but it's got a surprising amount of Edinburgh present. And right in the distance, we do have Arthur's Seat, which you can drive up to. Now, if you paid attention to the user group page, you probably sort of recognize a picture of Buttercup, the small little horse, Splunk's mascot. And yeah, I went up Arthur's Seat one day just to take a picture of it. It was actually the other hill, but I did go up this one to try to take pictures, but the other hill just proved a bit nicer for the picture. Obviously, don't drive like this because it's just horrendous, and you probably kill yourself. But it's a video game, and you can really just do what you please here. So a lot of the city that you'd expect, like Abbey Hill right in front of us, a lot of the east and west of the city, and sadly, if you go over here, very gently, you can tell that Leith and other areas like Granton and Trinity and all that, they don't exist in this game. It is just New Town and Old Town. As this is a racing game based in Edinburgh, you should expect races to take place in Edinburgh. So I'm gonna show you one of them, the Edinburgh Stockbridge race, which you would think drives around Stockbridge, but as you can probably see very soon, there's not a lot of Stockbridge to go about. You can sort of see the dashboard is already trying to populate with information, but it won't kick in until I actually start driving the car, which in this case is the Lamborghini Huracan. So straight in. So when you're racing or doing navigation, you can sort of see these arrows telling you where to go, and the yellow and red ones just mean that your car is probably going too fast for it. And every time I have attempted this race, I have always screwed up this corner. So you can rewind time, thankfully. And what I'll do is I'll just slow down a bit and actually stay on the street this time. So you have to hit all these checkpoints that are sort of depicted by flares. And this is meant to be Stockbridge, if you haven't guessed, but it's just not here. And instead, if I can pull it back up, you're just gonna see Dean Bridge, I'm assuming, because I can't actually see the other side of it. And we're back in the city. And actually, this is the best I've actually taken that corner whenever I've done this race. So I'm actually doing pretty darn good. And this one, I always hit this wall here. But I'm going to take it because I'm actually...
Just that. Give you like 2 minutes of race.
Access to the analytics workspace, which is what the old metrics workspace used to be a couple of versions back, but was baked into Splunk, I think, 2 years ago. So you just go to search and reporting and you click the analytics button and it takes you to this nice glass table style UI. And if there's any metrics data anywhere, it should display it on the left. Obviously, I've not generated anything in the past hour. So if I look back over the last 48 hours, or even the last 7 days, be down here. There we go. Not quite sure what the difference between these two settings are, but anyway, we've now got our car metrics, and you can see that there is a lot of different metrics values that we can click through. For instance, let's click distance, and we can change the aggregation. So let's click on max, and I want to see this split by, because it's all fine and dandy seeing the max in general, but I'd like to see what sort of car I've driven the most. So on this graph you can see that on the 14th I drove the Lamborghini the most, whereas on yesterday, when I was recording more footage, this unknown car, which I cannot remember what car this was, is down here. Now, these are populated from the metrics themselves, but there is a Python file within the TA that works out the sort of car classes. So if there's a car missing, it's likely that the Python file might be missing a value, maybe. But for now, you can sort of work out yourself what car these are. And obviously you can keep adding items like this, and we just want to keep doing it by car name. And obviously if you know how to run mstat commands within SPL, and you don't need to access the workspace, this is good for like an investigation sort of scenario. But if we return to the TA Racing Telemetry app, we can look at the dashboards as have been shown off in the past with various bits of footage. So there are free dashboards. So the one that you've seen with the game footage in the corner was Forza Real Time. This won't load any data up because there's nothing going in at the moment. But you can see from here that it's just doing mstats commands on position and all that sort of stuff. And the interesting one, which is the map, is just taking car position and using speed as the value that it uses for the brightness or the colored values in it. If you're not actively playing the game, but you want to look at data, there's a previous sessions option, and this one's really cool because it lists all the sessions that you've had in the past time frame, and if you click it, it will generate the overall sort of activity for that PlayStation. So over that 18 minutes, you can see the amount of steering that I did, the driving, so like the speed in miles per hour, just change it to the RPM of the engine, the various inputs that I did over that period, and tire temperatures, which seem awfully high, but I think these are like the maximum tire temperature, unless something has gone horribly wrong with that car. And then you have this map, of which I think I was driving around to get the panoramas of the various parts of the map, going from, I think this is Ashmore, all the way up to the Lake District area. And I can pick different sessions in different cars and load up new information. Sadly, I don't think Forza has, or at least Forza Horizon doesn't have the concept of laps, or, well, it does, but the recent races that I've done didn't have any laps in it, so you're not going to get any lap drill downs in here. I personally think this map is like the coolest part of the dashboard, and I really want to work out what these coordinates actually refer to in regards to X and Z, because if it is a case of one-to-one representation on the world map, then maybe with the brand new Dashboard Studio you could maybe overlay this on the road map itself. The final dashboard is the real-time one, which is just like a condensed version of the Forza real-time map. There's nothing particularly different about it compared to the other one, apart from the fact that it's got a little tab for video that you can just throw the video of the gameplay over.
And with that, bring your volumes back down to something manageable, so you can not get blasted by everyone talking on the mics anymore. So yeah,
Well, I'd wait just to talk because I'm usually quite loud, so hopefully you've all turned your volume down.
so I apologize if it was a bit long, like a bit all over the place, that video. I was up until like half one, cutting a version of this together, which didn't quite work because there's a lot of elements that just didn't want to stay at the correct timings or whatever. But I will be trying to make a decent version of this and uploading it separately from the user group, so people can actually watch this in probably a better quality than what the meeting had.
Thanks for that, Andrew. No, I thought that was really great. Yeah, obviously the sound, you know, with the volume right up, we could hear. I think we heard enough to kind of get the understanding of it. I guess my only quick question is, like, obviously metrics data is quite small, but you know, what sort of ingest were you having, and were you just, did you just do a little play around, or was there quite a lot of data you captured? Obviously, you didn't show all of it.
I haven't checked. Obviously, in metrics is I should know this off the top of my head. It's like 100 kilobytes per event or something like that.
Right.
So they are small, and I don't think I've got many events at all as part of it. Yeah, I didn't really look to see. I mean, that dashboard itself had the number of events in the previous session. So if I try skipping, back to,
I guess the reason I'm asking is I guess this is easy to set up with a free community version, right? It's not you know, unless you're probably playing like 12, 14 hours a day, you're probably not going to go anywhere near the sort of free version.
Yeah, certainly not. I mean, so 18 minutes of play seemed to cap out at 10,000. Yeah. So I'm not 100% sure if that's actually like for like. I mean, if it's one event every 100 milliseconds, then 10 events a second.
Okay.
So yeah, it shouldn't be. I don't think it'd be too massive if you actually set it up. And if we were to do live, like if we were to do this in a live sort of user group environment, I would have brought my PC and then had something separate for it to send data to, and then people could check it out themselves rather than having to explain everything sort of clumsily. But yeah, I would recommend having a look into it. It supports the newest Forza game and F1 2019, Project Cars, and other games that have telemetry in it. And it has made me interested into looking about how to get data from other games. Like I tried getting logs from Team Fortress 2 a couple of days ago, but I was just getting client logs, whereas server logs would probably be more preferable. And I know Splunk have done Minecraft for one of their .comps. I think it was 2020, and they just installed Bucket and ingested the logs from what I can tell from that. So yeah, anyone can Splunk video games if they want. It's pretty much the takeaway from this.
You just got to find where the data is.
Oh yeah.
No, that's really good. Thanks, Andrew. That was really good.
So while I'm here, I am just going to spin the reel while I'm sharing the screen, and we'll go into any other business straight after that.
There can be no controversy after this, even if it's a hair width.
So I have removed Rich, and I think someone had left the call. If they win, then I will try to contact them. But the problem with the Splunk User Group, I mean, it's not a normal problem. But if you're trying to talk to someone about giving a raffle prize, you need to get their email address because they're redacted on the site. So I am just going to click shuffle a ton of times, and you can tell that it's already worked because I tested it like 2 hours ago. Okay, so I'm just going to spin.
Oh, feel the excitement. Needs like a drum roll or something.
And it's Andy who's left. Okay.
Oh
so,
wait, it's still.
No,
it's definitely Andy.
Okay, so I'll message Andy and see if he wants to win it, and if not, I'll spin it again in private and try to contact the winner after that. Okay, so I will now stop sharing my screen, and we'll get back to the end part of the user group. So if you, Tom, do you just want to?
Yep, I was already ready and waiting, buddy. Oh, excuse my really bad desktop.
So is there anything that anyone still in the call would like to ask or discuss? Feel free to put your hand up or unmute at any point. I don't think we particularly have a sort of system here, just whatever works.
Ooh, looks like we might get off with it.
People just want to have a dinner, because I know I do.
I think everyone's just ready to go and Splunk Forza, right? I mean, that's what everyone's wanting to do now, right?
Yeah.
Go buy it first.
I will say, in hindsight, I should have mentioned that I'm not a particularly good player of the game, and also I'm not trying to advertise the game. Although I was looking into raffling it, but it had shot up in price since I bought it months ago. So I think the sequel is actually cheaper on Steam, for example. But obviously not trying to advertise any products here. It's just an example for showing how you can ingest data like that.
Just used it for the data.
Yeah. And while I'm here, because I actually, for the full version of the video that I tried to submit everyone to, I had this as a prop, which is the What's Cooking guide. So
yeah, your background settings don't let us see that, buddy.
Pardon?
Yeah, but your blurred background thing doesn't seem to let us. It seems to not recognize it as a face or.
Yeah. Well,
was that from the trust? Was it?
Yeah, but you can buy a physical copy on the store, but I think there's an online copy of it as well, and it goes into things you can Splunk at home. So iTunes history, and I think the more interesting one is pickles, which I haven't read in a while, but Splunking pickles is certainly a topic. So yeah, I'd recommend checking that out if you don't want to Splunk video games, but you want to do something at home. And with that, final call.
Nope. Looks
Nope.
like we got away with it, mate. Whew.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Tom, for presenting your topic competently, and me not so much, driving quite badly. And
yours is more visual.
Badly.
I did enjoy the insights there, and yeah, it's always good to see data, even from things like games and stuff, right?
Yeah. So if you want to get involved, there are links if you haven't joined the user group already, or the LinkedIn page. There's the Slack channel, which I seem to be the only person chatting in at the moment, which is just advertising the user group. But the Slack itself is very useful if you try to, if you've got issues with Splunk, because there are experts on there pretty much any hour of the day. And then if you want to contact us personally, our email addresses are down at the bottom. And with that, I'm going to stop recording, and hope everyone has a good evening. Thanks very much for coming along.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks very much, guys. That's really good.